On February 1st, 1994, in Punta Gorda, Florida, two hunters were out in the woods when they came across the mutilated corpse of a male. The body was badly decomposed and appeared to have been outside for about a month. The body had what appeared to be rope burns on the skin and pelvic region. The genitalia on the male victim had also been removed and discarded. It would not be until almost 25 years, in 2021, that DNA testing confirmed the victim as 27-year-old Gerald Jerry Lombard of Lowell, Massachusetts. Lombard vanished from his home in Florida in 1991 and was never seen or heard from again. In early 1996, for months, a family in Northport, Florida, noticed that their dog had been bringing them bones from what they believed was the neighborhood. It wasn't until later that the dog brought home a human skull that the family contacted authorities. Police eventually recovered the chest and hip bones a half-mile from the residence after conducting a search a day later. More skeletal remains were discovered in an isolated wooded area. They found a right hand and human torso still covered in flesh. Medical examiners assumed the body had been severely mutilated, particularly around the genitalia. The Northport skeleton is referred to as the Sarasota County John Doe and was never officially identified. On March 7, 1996, in Northport, Florida, while traveling down Route 75, a man pulled off onto Laramie Circle to urinate. After passing the forest line to find a good place to relieve himself, the man came across a naked male corpse positioned face up into the shape of a cross. The man immediately contacted the Northport Police Department. According to the medical examiner, the body found had been in the woods 10 days before finally being discovered. The body had 4 stab wounds and the genitals were mutilated. The victim's feet were covered in cuts and scrapes, and slash marks could be seen on his upper body. This indicated that the victim tried to run away from whoever killed them. It was also assumed that the man had been tied up before he was slain because of the rope marks on his body. Police officers also noted that rope marks were on a tree near the discovery of the bones. It wasn't until 1999 that the victim would be identified as 35-year-old William John Bill Melaragno. On April 17, 1996, in Charlotte County, Florida, another human skull was discovered. Police searched the surrounding woods and found not only the rest of the bones belonging to the skull, but a second body. The first body found was dismembered. This body was later identified as 25-year-old Kenneth Lee Smith. He was identified when Smith's sister called police after seeing photos on the news of a faint tattoo still visible on the unidentified man's shoulder. The second body was a man who had been raped, murdered, and mutilated only a day before, and was identified as 21-year-old Richard Allen Montgomery. Montgomery's mother informed police that a few weeks before her son's death, he had told her he met a new friend, and that friend's name was Dan Conahan. Daniel Owen Conahan Jr. was born in Charlotte, North Carolina on May 11, 1954. Shortly after his birth, his parents moved to Punta Gorda, Florida. When Conahan was a teenager, he discovered he was gay. The news of his homosexuality displeased his parents, and they sent him to several psychiatrists. Conahan believed that his sexuality was not a disease and that it only angered him that his parents did not accept who he was. Conahan would later say, "It wasn't the kind of thing you were open about in the 1970s, but I found gay bars, and if I got there early, they wouldn't card me. Being gay is a part of God's plan, too." Daniel Conahan graduated from Miami Norland High School in 1973. He was described as a quiet loner. He joined the United States Navy in 1977 and was stationed at Naval Station Great Lakes in Illinois. In 1978, Daniel Conahan was nearly court-martialed for taking fellow male naval officers off base for sex, and was finally discharged a few months later after getting into a fight with a man upon whom he had attempted to force oral sex on. In 1993, Daniel Conahan moved back to Punta Gorda to live with his elderly parents. In 1995, Conahan became a licensed practical nurse, graduating at the top of his class from Charlotte Vocational Technical Center. He later found employment at the Charlotte Regional Medical Center in Punta Gorda, Florida. Daniel Conahan spent the majority of his spare time frequenting gay bars. He would later say, "I've learned that there are a lot of hitchhikers on US 41 from Northport to Fort Myers, and some of them were looking to perform sex acts for money." During the discovery of the skulls and bones, the local media dubbed the murders the Hog Trail Killings and the Hog Trail Murders. This was named for the wooded areas in which the bodies of the victims were found. In May 1996, several witnesses directed police towards Daniel Conahan. One of the witnesses had managed to escape Conahan's car when it became stuck while driving down a dirt road. Police also linked Daniel Conahan to a 1994 police report from Fort Myers, Florida. This report stated that a witness by the name of Stanley Burden had been propositioned, tied to a tree, and nearly strangled. Stanley Burden survived and had rope scars still on his body 2 years later. Daniel Conahan's credit cards were subpoenaed and his house was searched. During the search, police found evidence linking him to both Stanley Burden and the deceased 21-year-old Richard Allen Montgomery, whose mother already told police that her son had known Conahan. On July 3, 1996, Daniel Conahan was arrested and brought to Lee County for the attempted murder of Burden. The following February, Conahan was charged with murder of Richard Allen Montgomery. On August 9, 1999, Daniel Conahan waived his right to a jury trial, thereby electing a bench trial. Stanley Burden, who had been nearly killed by Daniel Conahan in 1994, testified in the case. On August 17, 1999, Judge William Blackwell deliberated for 25 minutes and found Conahan guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and kidnapping. And in November of the same year, a jury recommended a sentence of death. And on December 10, 1999, Judge Blackwell agreed. Daniel Conahan is currently sitting on death row at Union Correctional Institution in Railford, Florida. But while he sits in prison awaiting death, more bodies are being discovered. On May 22nd in 1997, in Port Charlotte, Florida, another skeleton was found. A county construction worker was clearing brush on a dirt path when he discovered skeletal remains under a pepper tree. The coroner determined the victim was deceased for several years. A year later, DNA identified the remains as 24-year-old William Billy Charles Patton, who had disappeared in 1993. On October 19th in 2000, in Northport, Florida, skeletal remains were found in a wooded area west of Toledo Blade Boulevard. In January 2001, landscapers unearthed human bones in Groper Hole Drive in Boca Grande, Florida. On November 28th in 2001, during construction near US 41 in Charlotte Harbor, Florida, construction crew discovered human remains later determined to be male. On January 6th, 2002, a man was discovered by county employees near a landfill site off Zamel Road in Punta Gorda, Florida. The body remains unidentified, and the case is still being investigated as a homicide. Investigators suspect that these discoveries might be tied to Daniel Conahan, and they're sure that more bodies will be found.